The city centre of Birmingham in the UK's Midlands, home of the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, and now the focus of a collaboration between Christians and Muslims trying to pressure the government to do more about climate change. The rally is one of a series being held by supporters of a march by volunteers 1,000 miles from Northern Ireland to London. The rallies hope to bring home to politicians and people in the street the seriousness of global warming and the need for the government of rich countries to act now.
Well, Christian Aid, or the Relief and Development Agency of the Protestant churches in the United Kingdom and Ireland, and we've been working for over 50 years with poor communities overseas, and those communities are saying to us that their biggest threat now is coming from climate change, and they've asked us to act and give them support in tackling climate change. Now, we know that the British population are still somewhat sceptical about whether climate change is really happening. So what we decided to do was to organise a march from one end of the country to another. So back out in July, 20 core marchers set out from Belfast and Northern Ireland and have headed to Glasgow, Edinburgh and then down to Birmingham. We're going to go on to Cardiff and the Labour Party conference at Bournemouth and end up in London on the 2nd of October. And the march is carrying the message to the British public that the time has come to cut carbon emissions.
The two charities argue that climate change is caused by excessive emissions of carbon into the atmosphere, and that the rich countries of the developed world, including Britain, are the main source of the problem. They're calling on the British government to reduce the UK's carbon output by 80% by the year 2050. Floods in Bangladesh and droughts in Sudan have both been blamed on global warming. Activists say only drastic action by the developed countries can head off a climate catastrophe.
As you know, Bangladesh is one of the very vulnerable countries to impact of the global climate change. We live in a situation where there is big sea and we have a big coastal area which will be affected by future sea level rise. Right now there is salinity which affects water and agriculture in our coastal villages, which also affect food and nutrition and health of the poor people in Bangladesh. And if there is a rise up sea, you know, 1/5 of the coastal area will go underwater, and we have a very populous country. We have 150 million people right now, and where they will go, that would be a big social problem that will increase conflict and migration.
That Islamic Relief and Christian Aid have joined forces in this campaign is significant, when recent news in the UK has been stressing the differences between the two communities. Both charities argue the challenge of global warming demands joint action.
People talk about the issues that that are controversial, that separate us, that differentiate one another, but here this is such a cross-cutting issue that as a Muslim, if we're not concerned about the climate, I think that would make us short of our faith, would fall short of our faith. Same for Christians that fall short of this issue, that fall short of being a Christian, and there's a natural understanding that faith overrides here, that brings us together, irrespective if it's Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim. This issue is cross-cutting and it's at the forefront. We have to take care of our environment, and you'll find that throughout scriptures all over.
While praising the UK government's targets for reduction of carbon emissions, the activists say all rich countries need to do much more.
We're pleased that the British government have brought forward a climate change bill which is currently before Parliament, and we'd be the first to say that it's the best piece of legislation facing a Parliament anywhere in the world. But the reality is it still isn't good enough. British government are talking about cutting carbon emissions by 60% by 2050. Now, if we want to stay below the 2 degrees increase in temperature, which scientists are telling us is the critical level, and the level which the British government and other governments accept, then the science tells us that the cuts need to be of at least 80%. So good, but not good enough.
The rally will make its way to London via the southern England coastal town of Bournemouth, where the UK's ruling Labour Party will be holding its annual general meeting next month.